Norway has revealed one of its deepest Cold War secrets. Oslo commissioned the construction of a modern coastal military defense facility to protect itself against the possibility of Soviet attack. The base in Hurdler on Askøy Island near Bergen is assured of a more peaceful future, as it's due to open to the public in summer. It's one of 4 clandestine bases built during the Cold War at a cost of billions of kroner.
Tourists pour into northern Norway every summer, chasing midnight sun and postcard fjords. They hike past glassy lakes and quiet villages, never realizing what the mountains are hiding. Behind the postcard, Norway has a second map, one written in reinforced concrete and blast doors. Whole air stations carved into gabbro rock, submarine docks tunneled straight through a mountain, miles of cable, bunkered fuel, armored workshops, and sleeping quarters sealed behind doors that look like they belong in a disaster film. For decades, those caverns sat in the dark, a rumor more than a reality. Now the lights are coming back on. This isn't nostalgia, it's strategy. At the height of the Cold War, Norway maintained roughly 3,000 underground military facilities spread across a population smaller than many world cities. Some were small command posts. Others were enormous secret bases where jets and submarines could vanish from satellites and reappear at will. Many grew out of the country's World War II experience, when German engineers hammered Atlantic wall bunkers into cliffs and coastlines. The instinct to survive by going underground never left. It only went quiet. Then the ground shifted. War returned to Europe. Russian drills accelerated in the Arctic. Submarines began slipping through familiar waters with renewed confidence. Norway's answer wasn't to build glassy new bases with cinematic flyovers. It was to turn the key in old doors and remind the mountains what they were built for. Bardufoss is the symbol everyone remembers because it looks like something out of a spy novel. The air station sits north of the Arctic Circle. Its hangars dug into the mountain like vaults. Rough rock walls give way to bright concrete, curved ceilings, and the low mechanical heartbeat of a working flight line. Norway's F-35 Lightning II fighters sit there like predators at rest, tucked beneath arches that swallow sound. Opened in 1938, the same airfield once sheltered German fighters guarding the battleship Tirpitz when it hid in a nearby fjord. After the war, the Royal Norwegian Air Force moved in and threaded entire air operations into the mountain. Fuel farms, weapon stores, maintenance bays, crew rooms, and blast doors that could shrug off anything short of a nightmare. Then 40 years ago, the cavern was mothballed, silent, dust settling on switches. Today it hums again. What changed isn't just political mood, it's technology. In Ukraine, the world watched multi-million-dollar jets die on the ground to drones that cost less than a decent laptop. Rubber tires stacked on wings and wire mesh caps over open shelters look desperate because they are. Dispersal helps, scattering aircraft across many strips and hidden pads. But a hardened shelter is a multiplier. The hardest shelter is a mountain. You don't just protect the airplane, you protect the supply, the crews, the rhythm that keeps a squadron alive. That's what Bardufoss gives Norway: resilience and survivability. 2 words that sound dry until you picture a $100 million fighter jet lit up by a $300 kamikaze drone. Follow the map north and seawards and you hit a name whispered with the same mixture of awe and disbelief: Olavsvern. If Bardufoss feels like an underground airport, Olavsvern is a secret harbor with a pulse. The base is cut into a mountainside near the seam where the Norwegian Sea meets the Barents Sea, an exit tunnel that runs roughly 3,000 feet right through the rock and ends at a massive blast door. Above it lies about 900 feet of tough gabbro, rock so dense it reads like armor. This is no simple boat garage, it's a complex command center, storage, deep water dock, dry dock, maintenance corridors, living quarters, all wrapped in a mountain jacket. It exists because geography gave Norway a lever, the 400-mile stretch between the mainland, Bear Island, and Svalbard, nicknamed the Bear Gap, funnels Russian submarines out toward the Atlantic. A base in that gap can do more than watch. It can turn the funnel into a trap. Olavsvern took shape in stages beginning in the 1950s, paced up not by Norwegian ambition, but by the steady buildup of the Soviet Northern Fleet. It cost roughly $450 million and demanded NATO money to finish. By the time the last bolts were tightened, the Soviet Union had collapsed. But the base wasn't a white elephant. NATO ships used it anyway, staging operations into waters where silence decides who wins. Then came a strange decade. In 2009, Norway's parliament voted barely to shut Olavsvern. In 2013, it sold the facility to private investors for about £7 million, a sum so low it sounded like a typo. The mountain harbor became a curiosity. Caravans and classic cars took shelter where submarines once hid from satellites. 2 Russian research ships and fishing vessels reportedly visited, legally, but the symbolism was loud. Rumors flew that the buyer had Russian ties. Whether true or not, the logic was ugly. A once secret NATO portal now renting space to the very nation it had been designed to monitor. That chapter didn't last. In 2020, Wilnor Governmental Services, linked closely to Norway's defense establishment, bought control and began repairs. The military footprint grew again. The US Navy kicked the tires with interest in basing nuclear submarines there. Olavsvern returned to its original sentence, a stone throw opening to cold strategic water. Ask why this is happening and people will give the short answer, Russia, and the longer one, which is also Russia. Norway's alarm bells didn't start with the invasion of Ukraine in 2022 or Crimea in 2014. Analysts date the turn back to around 2006-2008 when the Northern Fleet won fresh investment. Russian Arctic exercises resumed after a long pause, and interest in Arctic resources sharpened. The uniforms changed, the questions didn't. How do you deter your giant neighbor? How do you fight if you have to? And how do you keep your most expensive, fragile assets alive long enough to matter? Norway isn't acting alone. Across the Arctic, Russia has restarted about 50 Cold War-era facilities of different shapes and sizes. Sweden returned to its underground naval base at Musko, a submarine labyrinth blasted into granite not far from Stockholm. Further afield, countries are building, not just reopening, new underground sanctuaries. China's submarine pens bite into Hainan Island, doors opening under camera-proof overhangs into deep tunnels, while a vast new command center near Beijing sinks its teeth into bedrock. Iran shows off an underground missile city, like a stage set built to provoke. The logic is the same across time zones. If you fear a surprise strike from above, you go below. People will debate how much a 1970s or 1980s bunker can do against a 2025 precision weapon. The answer is complicated. True bunker-busting munitions exist. GPS-guided bombs can find vents and entrances spotted by satellites. A facility designed to survive the nearby blast of a nuclear weapon was not necessarily designed to defeat a smart bomb threading a specific shaft. That sounds damning until you remember what underground bases are actually for. They aren't invulnerable, they're stubborn. They force an enemy to spend more, risk more, fly closer, and use rarer munitions. They buy time and choices. Put differently, one hardened mountain may be the difference between a squadron dying on the tarmac in 10 minutes and still flying after the first wave. There's also the brutal math of money. Reactivating a Cold War base isn't as simple as flicking a breaker. Many were stripped when they closed. Miles of cable ripped out, control rooms emptied, pumps and filters sold for scrap, concrete sweats, tunnels flood, salt eats steel. To bring a site back, you reinstall everything and relay everything. You test ventilation against smoke and pressure and heat. You chase leaks through rock. You add new communications that weren't imagined when the walls were poured. All of that costs, and it costs in secrecy too. If a site spent a decade hosting tourists with flashlights or caravans on blocks, you assume foreign intelligence touched it, if not physically, then with sensors. In the age of commercial satellite imagery, a mountain base is no longer a ghost. You can spot its breath in winter and the geometry of its doors in summer. None of this makes bunkers obsolete, it just makes them honest. Britain shows how the story twists. Some Cold War facilities became museums, nightclubs, or sealed tombs. Others never stopped working. The RAF Air Command bunker continues. Northwood Headquarters, Britain's integrated military nerve center, went through a deep rebuild a little over a decade ago. MOD Corsham, a communication hub built on a warren of old stone quarries and government caverns once earmarked for national survival, still hums. Paper trails once open to historians have been folded back up, documents on nuclear planning reclassified. If a mothballed site in Britain were quietly reactivated, you probably wouldn't hear about it. That's the point. Norway isn't bracing for the end of the world. It's bracing for a world where the first day matters more than any day after, where the difference between readiness and regret is measured in meters of rock and seconds of shelter. In that world, a bunker is not a relic, it's a rehearsal. It's the country saying out loud to anyone listening in the wind over the Barents Sea, We've been here before, and we remember how to disappear.